Hello, everyone, and welcome to our exciting Achieving Zero Waste at UC Berkeley presentation. We really appreciate you taking time out of your day to be here. My name is Izzy Parna-Wolf, and I'm a zero waste specialist with Cal Zero Waste Campus Operations.
My name is Michelle Law, also a zero waste specialist with Cal Zero Waste Campus Operations.
So, without further ado, here's a quick agenda and overview of what we're going to talk about today. We'll begin by talking about zero waste at UC Berkeley. I'm sure you all have heard of and are familiar with the fact that we have a zero waste by 2020 goal, so we'll cover that a little bit. We'll then talk about how that ties into the zero waste building program, which is the main reason that we've called you all here today, and talk about what does that program look like, what are the different components of the program, and what to expect in terms of changes that you'll be seeing in your buildings. We'll then briefly cover what will happen in lab spaces, since some of your buildings do have lab spaces, and then end on a note of what you all as individuals and departments can do.
So as Izzy said, there is a zero waste by 2020 goal. A lot of folks think it's just a UC Berkeley centric goal, but fortunately it is a UC system wide. So all of UCs across California do have this goal of zero waste by 2020. And in our policy, it's defined in two ways. One is per capita, basically meaning how much trash, recycling, and compost each individual person on campus will generate. And that includes researchers, students, staff, faculty, visitors. There's a certain way that number is calculated so that it captures as many people as possible. The second way we measure zero waste is actually diversion rate, and that actually means the proportion of materials leaving campus that's either recycled, composted, or reused, and that's a certain percentage. So our goal for zero waste for diversion rate is actually 90%, and as for the per capita, there is a incremental reduction from 2015-16 pounds per person per day that we have to hit in the next couple of years. And so looking at this gives you kind of an idea or a snapshot of what's been going on campus. This is essentially the number of pounds a person generates per day. And again, this includes visitors, staff, faculty, students, all inclusive. And as you can see, it's going down in a downward trend through the last 6 years or so, since 2014 and 15. And so right now, each person, all of you all last year generated, on average, about a pound of recycling, composting, and trash each day of the year. And looking at landfill waste generated, so how much trash are we generating and burying as a campus, that number has also been going down despite the number of people on campus increasing enormously, exponentially actually. And so if you look over the last 10 years or so, we've decreased from about 5,000 tons a year to, I think last year was 3,702, so 3,700 tons a year. So we've gone down significantly despite population increases on campus.
So there's a lot that zero waste covers. One of the key things that is really the foundational baseline for zero waste programs is making sure that there is proper infrastructure on campus. And when I say infrastructure, I mean that there are bins that are clearly labeled, that there's a standardization to those bins, that they're strategically placed in areas on campus so that you all have easy and available access to recycling and composting your materials. So with that Zero Waste by 2020 goal in mind, our key push right now for the next semester is to make sure that our campus has that standard and that bin infrastructure in place, with the idea that we would then build upon that moving forward in terms of more outreach and education. So the focus right now with the Zero Waste Building Program is to make sure that those systems are in place in all of your buildings. And this is a program that has actually been ongoing for the past few years on campus. And there's about 40 or so buildings remaining that have yet to go through the Zero Waste Building Program. Some of those buildings are represented in this room today. And so the idea is we're really going to be focusing on that for the next semester and making sure that we get you all the bins that you need, we put them in centralized areas, and that everything is clearly labeled and matches the system that we have elsewhere on campus. So we have a process and timeline that we're going to be talking about today. And a key piece of this program is that we're doing it in partnership with several folks. Alongside the Custodial Services team. So they're a key piece and a key partner to this program. We want to make sure that the bins that we're putting out are done so in conjunction with that team so that you all get the proper servicing and frequency levels that we all have determined. And then making sure that we're communicating and being transparent throughout the process. One of the ways in which we're doing that is by hosting this town hall today. So making sure that you all are engaged with and know about these changes, and that you also have opportunities to ask questions you may have about this process and also provide any input that you might have. So as I mentioned, there's several key players, the building managers and coordinators, as well as the occupants. You all play a vital role in this process. Custodial Services, Cal Zero Waste, and then fire prevention is a piece of the puzzle as well, as we need to make sure that all of the bins are put in places that match up with the fire code, and making sure that any operational changes to these buildings match with fire prevention standards.
Yeah, and so to go a little more in depth on the process so you all kind of understand what will be the next steps after today, I'm going to walk all of us through that. And again, please, if any of you have questions, please keep them to the end. We will have some time for Q&A. So first off, is the town hall is something like this that's more public, it's visible, all of you guys are welcome to attend to get more information about how things are going. These are open, like Izzy said, this will be recorded and it will be posted on our website for you all to access or to share out to anyone who may not have been able to attend today. The next step is we'll be coming through each of the buildings, in this case the buildings that hopefully you all are in, and basically walking through every single space with the building managers, the building coordinators, and some department folks if they are available the time we're in the building. From there, we'll create digitized maps of where the bins will physically be located in every single building. That way, Custodial Services, our team, fire, and you all will know where the bins are supposed to go. So if one day, a bin's missing and it's on that map, then we know it walked away, as in disappeared. So we can go replace it or go find it. It's just so everyone's on the same page and knows where exactly everything goes. The next step will be deployment, and that's our phrasing is essentially getting the bins out there and doing what we call bin swaps. So we'll be removing all of the old 1970s round trash cans, for example, or the old metal bins, and putting in new bins that are matching our campus standards. And then from there, the week after the bins go out, we'll have a student staff member come by and make sure all the bins arrived in the right places, just to do a quick check. All the signs are there, all the bins are in place, all the lids and all the liners. And then lastly, the in-depth education. Some of you may have attended one before. The departmental presentations that we kind of do for specific folks that request it will come after all of the rollouts happen for the rest of the campus. So to go more in depth, like I mentioned, what will happen during the walkthrough is we will have the building manager or coordinator with us, as well as the custodial representative, the manager, the supervisor, or the lead with us during that walk, and we will all cohesively and together collaboratively identify locations for bins and also what bins go in certain locations. And so as you can see, we'll be getting rid of, like I said, the old trash cans, the old rubber ones, the metal ones, and then converting them into what's standard, something that's more cohesive and it's consistent with what we have on the rest of the campus. And then the deployment or the rollout of the bins will more than likely occur about a week or a week and a half to 2 weeks after the walkthrough. Those are still current estimates, projections, but any updates to those dates will be available on our website. As mentioned, the assessments will occur after to make sure, and then any in-depth adjustments or departmental presentations will have to happen after likely July once we get through all the buildings.
So now that Michelle went over the overview of the program, I'm going to go into a little bit more detail about the physical changes and the bins that you will expect to see in your buildings. So up here is an image of the different types of bin sets that we have on campus. You can see that there is a cohesion to all of the bin sets, the color coordination, the clear signage. And so what you can expect to see, the main bins that you will see in your buildings is in the bottom left corner. That's a Slim Jim set, as well as in the top right corner, we call that a Max R cabinet set. So pending how heavily trafficked certain areas of your spaces and your buildings are, as well as fire codes and the size of your hallways, those are the main sets that you will see. A key piece of this building program is moving towards a centralized system. So a lot of our buildings that have the older, outdated system right now have miscellaneous bins here and there. There's some spaces that have way too many bins, some that don't have enough. And so the idea with these centralized sets is that they will be strategically placed in common areas, meaning hallways, kitchen or break rooms, and then there'll also be compost bins in bathrooms. So the idea is that no matter where you are in your building, you will always have a central set relatively near you, and these sets will be collected by custodial on a daily basis. Another bin that you can expect to see, or bin combination that you expect to see in your buildings, we call this our mini bin set. This is what we use in office spaces. So it's a mini blue bin for mixed paper recycling combined with an attachable black landfill side saddle. And the reasoning behind this is that the majority of waste coming out of office spaces is really predominantly paper waste. So we want to make sure that we capture that. And then if you have any other materials, bottles and cans recycling or compostable materials, that's where you would then take those materials out to your nearest centralized set, which will either be in your break room or kitchen or hallway or the bathroom for compost. And these mini bins will be serviced once a week by Custodial Services. And all of that information is on the Custodial Services guide, which we have linked on our website and is also available on their website. So now I'm going to briefly go over the different waste streams and the high-level overview of what materials go into which bins. If you have specific questions about specific materials, please save that for the end and we'd be happy to answer it. So we do have a 4-stream system here at UC Berkeley. We have 2 different bins for recycling. There's the mixed paper recycling, which is for your basic paper, envelopes, files, that type of basic paper material that most of us have in our offices. The other one is for cans and bottles recycling. This is for number 1 and number 2 plastics, which includes plastic bottles, aluminum cans, as well as foil, and then glass bottles. And we can go into more depth on that one if you have more questions, which I anticipate. The other stream is compost, which is something we're really pushing across campus right now to make sure that we're effectively capturing all of our compostable materials. You can put any type of food waste into the compost bin. We also accept paper towels, paper napkins, as well as compostable foodware, which is being heavily used on campus now, as well as in the surrounding community. The last stream is landfill, which is the stream that we're actively really trying to reduce and minimize as much as possible. This is where there's a lot of snack packaging, right? Wrappers, chip bags, candy bar wrappers, that type of stuff goes in here. The number 3 through number 7 plastics, cartons, a lot of those other disposable materials, single-use plastic disposables. So this is also the area where we're gonna ask folks to, actively think on and reflect about if you find that you're continuously using the landfill bin, that's an opportunity to stop and reflect on what those materials are and see if there's a reusable alternative or potentially a recyclable or compostable alternative. So since some of you do have lab spaces in your buildings, I do want to mention that for this part of the program, lab spaces will be excluded. And the reason for that is that the Zero Waste Building program, as is currently developed, is developed with office materials in mind. Labs definitely have a different makeup in terms of the type of materials that they produce, in terms of the volume. So we are in the active process of developing a pilot program that is modeled off of the Zero Waste Building program for labs specifically, but at this time, the lab spaces will not be included. That will come at a later date. So what can you do? One thing we're gonna ask is that you all sort your waste properly, especially once we give you all the correct bins, the signage. There'll be labels that have pictures of images to make it as easy and accessible as possible. We encourage you all to use reusables whenever possible, especially if you have kitchens or break rooms, to make sure that those are stocked with reusables, that you're bringing your own utensils and Tupperware to use with lunch as much as possible to try and really minimize the waste produced, especially those disposable plastics that end up being landfilled. And in general, with the number 3 piece, just trying to reduce your landfill and plastic waste as much as possible. So we wanted to end on a note of also mentioning that there are a lot of campus resources, in addition to our department and campus operations, that are doing some incredible zero waste work right now. Our campus community is extremely involved, both staff, faculty, and students. So in addition to our website, which I recommend that you all go, we do have a page dedicated specifically to the Zero Waste Building program that outlines the overview of what we just mentioned, as well as highlights our projected dates and timelines for the rollouts. The Office of Sustainability is a great resource. The Student Environmental Resource Center, CERC, also has a lot of information. And the Zero Waste Coalition is doing a lot of really exciting and important work right now. And we'll link a lot of these to our website later. later, but we just wanted to make sure if you are interested in learning more about zero waste, there's a lot of other folks that we're partnering with who are doing incredible work right now. Here is a slide with our contact information, so you're welcome to jot down our emails if you'd like, as well as our phone number. We will be communicating all of this information out through the building managers and coordinators. Whenever we have an official date set up for the walkthrough, and once we confirm the rollout date, we'll be sending them an email that they will be forwarding to all of you so that you will know when to expect to see us in the building. Please note, you'll see one of us, as well as the team that Michelle mentioned, walking around. We'll always be wearing something that identifies us as being a part of Cal Zero Waste or campus operations. Feel free to say hi, ask us a zero waste question. But you will be seeing us walking around in the next few weeks or so. Oops.
One thing to note is I can pull up the website later if anyone's interested, but each of your buildings is assigned to one of us at the moment. So on the website, you'll see a building, one of our names, as well as a projected date. That date is fluctuable probably within a week timeframe, a week before or after, depending on when we can get the walkthroughs done. But each of us is assigned to each building, so you'll be able to know who to contact for each one.
So I think now is the time to transition to questions. So if you have a question, please raise your hand, and I'll just remind you that we will be repeating questions so that it all gets captured in our audio recording. So the question was about 4th Street and asking about if they could get a Maxar cabinet set in their kitchen. And that's something we'll have to discuss later, so you feel free to send me an email. One thing I will note is that for this next semester, the buildings listed on our website are going to be the ones that will get this full program start to finish. So there are some buildings that exist, such as 4th Street, that have already been through the program. So you're welcome to send us questions or ask us for any changes that might need to occur, and then we'll have to factor that into this timeline to see when we can respond to that and what that looks like. So the question was about different types of paper and whether or not they can go into the mixed paper recycling, depending on how glossy they are, the different type of paper it comes from. And I'd say for the most part, most paper can go into mixed paper recycling. We have something called a tear test, where you can try and rip it, and if it is heavily coated in plastic, you will be able to see that plastic film start to separate from the paper side. We don't want anything that's laminated, right? That's paper covered in plastic. I don't know if you have anything else to add, Michelle.
Yeah, the tear test is one good way because it really tells you if there's plastic on it. Like sometimes the glossy, it's not really plastic. It's just a layer of, let's say, wax or something that could look like plastic. So try and tear it. If you absolutely can't tear it, then it's definitely not recyclable because there's a layer of plastic, or maybe even more than one. If you can tear it and you're still doubting, you can take a look at where you teared and see if there's those little fibers coming out. If there are, then that's paper. So that's really the best tip we have, is just to try and tear it if you have any doubt.
And I would say for the most part, most of the paper that you all are using in your offices should go into mixed paper recycling. There's probably some few exceptions that might be coming up. So if you have any specific examples, you're welcome to ask or contact us later. But the average paper that you are using can go into mixed paper recycling. So the question was about milk cartons and asking if they can go in the compost because they appear to be wax and paper, and they're not accepted by our composting facility. And oftentimes milk cartons and other juice cartons are actually plastic lined. It's not always wax, and so we do accept, a jug, like a plastic jug of milk. That's usually number 2 plastic. That could go into our recycling. But cartons on this campus do need to go into the landfill. And one thing I do want to mention, some of you might be a little confused in this moment, is that recycling and composting varies from community to community, municipality to municipality. So there may be some things that you do wherever you live or previous places that you've worked that do differ from our rules here at UC Berkeley. And so that's just something to note, that you do need to sort your materials according to the signage that we have here on campus. And there's reasoning behind that.
Yeah, so the question was if a paper or a stack of paper has staples, paper clips on it, or even like an envelope that has a plastic kind of opening or a window, if that's okay to put into the recycling bin. The answer is yes. The small bits of plastic are okay as long as you're not throwing like a whole plastic envelope in there. And as for the paper clips and the staples, there's actually a magnet usually at the paper recycling facilities that are able to pull out the magnets. Obviously, paper clips, you can always reuse them, so you don't have to get rid of them, but staples are fine.
So the question was specifically about materials that are food soiled and whether or not that impacts if they should go into the recycling or compost. And so one of the questions that was specifically brought up was with pizza boxes. Pizza boxes should go in the compost. That being said, we don't want a lot of pizza boxes being shoved into these bins. So if you find you're in an area where you know there's a lot of pizza boxes being produced, yourself or the event organizer or someone else can reach out to us as well as the Custodial Services team, and that's where we could maybe look and see if there's an alternative way of collecting those pizza boxes so that we don't have an operational issue on our end. I'd say the general rule is we don't want anything that's touched food in the mixed paper recycling. So you think about it, we don't want cheeses, grease, salad dressings on paper. That's going to impact its ability to be recycled. So any type of paper that's coated in food, whether it's a paper plate, paper napkin, paper towel, pizza box, that's going to go in the compost is the general rule. In terms of other materials, once it gets to plastics, it does get a little bit trickier. I do want to remind everyone that the only plastics we accept in our cans and bottles recycling are number 1 and number 2 plastics. So the market is changing as we're speaking right now. So oftentimes a lot of like prepackaged salads, those types of clamshells and whatnot, sometimes the number plastic of that has been changing. But I'd say for the most part, if something is coated in oil and residue that you don't think you could easily get off, I would put it into the landfill. And then I would also try and find an alternative to that prepackaged item.
So the question was specific for, I think, GA, classroom events over weekends and when workers generate essentially what happens to that work order. Is that correct? Yeah. So it goes to different folks. I mean, we all get the weekly weekend event emails, obviously, and those go to Custodial, Zero Waste, and Grounds, Landscape Services. Each group does their different functions. Obviously, Landscape Services is outdoor events, Custodial is indoor events. Zero Waste, it actually, from my knowledge, it depends on the quantity of people. So if it's like a 5,000 person headcount event, then additional service or additional carts will be provided to handle the volume of material that's coming out from a building that's going to hold 5,000 when it normally holds 500. So the servicing level or the number of carts will change depending on the event. So if it's a large enough event, we typically will reach out to determine what's needed because we want to prevent overflows over a weekend, especially if it's a holiday weekend or if it's a long weekend, if it's spring break or whatever it might be. So it's a case by case. For Zero Waste specifically, we run the operations for the trucks. So that really depends on the volume of material that's coming out of the building and the event, if there's food involved. Is the other piece. So there's a lot of moving pieces to that. So it really depends on the event. So the first question was the 0.95 pounds a day per person metric that we showed earlier on the slide here. To reiterate, it includes recycling, composting, and landfill. And the question was how much of that is just based on just buildings with pure paper or recycling versus other buildings that might have more food. And so to answer that question, we unfortunately do not have that granular data available right now. This is a campus-wide number. It's an average for the campus as a whole. I think moving on into the future, we're looking into how we can get that granular data because we know these questions do come up and people are interested in what this specific building is generating on average. So that's something we're working towards and trying to figure out how to capture that data right now. But at the moment, this is a campus-wide number.
And the second part of your question was about, I think you used the word pre-cycling. Another word I'd use for that is reduction, right? Reduction and reuse. So what measures are we taking or outreach and education efforts are we doing around this, specifically with paper, but also talk about in general. So reduction is the top part of the waste hierarchy, right? Reduction, reuse, recycling, and composting. So I do want to make it very clear, this program is part of our zero waste work, but it is not the only piece of the work that we are doing, nor is it the only piece of the work that we'll be doing moving forward. It's really making sure you have to have that infrastructure set up before you can build and expand on these programs. So reduction is something we've actually done a lot of work on and will continue to do. We've worked with purchasing and procurement to look at what are the materials coming into campus and are there ways to set up purchasing differently, to maybe prioritize buying in bulk, minimize packaging, all of that. In terms of paper, I think we are in general in an age that is moving away from paper. I understand that there's some resistance. There is going to be resistance to a lot of these changes. And at the end of the day, not everyone will be on board right away once we make these changes. I commend you for moving paperless. And I guarantee you that for as much, maybe pushback you're getting, I guarantee that the students and majority of people would actually really understand and be supportive of moving away from paper evaluations and moving towards online evaluations. So I think, I do want to just mention the Zero Waste Coalition is doing a lot of work, and they're a great resource if you do want to tap into the student body to get some of their input. If you have an idea, a zero waste related idea that you want to have student support of, they'd be a great resource. I know the Office of Sustainability, someone working for them was looking into trying to do a campaign around moving away from paper and minimizing the amount of paper use on this campus. So there is a lot of work that's happening. It's just making sure you're plugging into the right people. But thank you for that question and a reminder that reduction is a key piece of the work that we're doing. So the question was about contamination and improper sorting and kind of the impact that can have. And so we're aware there is always a little bit of wiggle room, to be honest, for contamination because we're not perfect and there's going to be human error. So we really do ask that everyone try their best and take contamination seriously while understanding that there will be times you might missort. So in terms of on our end, we ask the custodial team to take the material that they collect, say they collect a compost bag, to put it into the compost. If they notice that it's heavily contaminated, we've asked that they let us know so that we can then do some outreach and education and figure out where is that contamination coming from. Sometimes it is a specific, could be a specific lab, a specific cafe or restaurant, a classroom area, and then we try and kind of problem solve and figure out why is that happening. One thing that we can ask for you all to do is, you're the eyes and ears in your spaces. So if you see, a space that continuously bins aren't being used properly, or there's colleagues that seem to be unclear about how to properly sort waste, that's where you could always ask for us to come and do some outreach and education. That may not happen right away, given that right now we're focusing on the infrastructure piece, but I do think outreach and education is important and is an ongoing piece that this campus will always need and benefit from. We do send our materials elsewhere, and if those other folks find that the material is too contaminated to accept, they will let us know. That hasn't happened with our compost. With bottles and cans recycling, they will let us know if there's a space that they couldn't collect the material because it was too contaminated or it had plastic bags in it, which the outdoor carts shouldn't for bottles and cans. So once they let us know, then we have a system and chain of we let other people know, we try and figure out and problem solve where that material came from.
The question was for facilities work orders, how far in advance you need to submit a work order for events, correct? For events. And so from my knowledge, and you can always go to the website as well, Facility Services, but it should be at least 5 days for events so we have adequate time to plan it. Okay, so the question was, do we have a list of the facilities that each waste stream goes to? And the second part of that question was, does UC Berkeley have the same rules as the City of Berkeley? So to answer the question, yes, we do have a list of facilities that these materials go to. They are on our website on our FAQ page, which will be sent out, or you all should have seen the link as well on the invitation to this town hall. But the mixed paper stays in Berkeley. It goes to Community Conservation Corps. And then cans and bottles is collected by a third party that goes to Union City, a facility down there. Compost goes to Richmond, about 20 minutes up north, I believe, over to West Contra Sanitary Landfill. They have a composting operation there. The landfill goes to Richmond, California as well, to the landfill, the sanitary landfill up there. Some of the compost coming from campus goes to actually the City of Berkeley if it's collected on the weekends, just for operational sake. The facility in Richmond isn't open on weekends. All that is listed on our website, so no one needs to write or type that down furiously. As for the second part of the question, we do not have the same operations as the city of Berkeley. We do operate our own trucks, so our team, on top of the two of us, also includes a team of truck drivers. So we run our own garbage, recycling, and compost trucks throughout campus, with the exception of the cans and bottles carts. But we collect everything else in-house, and we take those directly to these facilities to drop off. And the city of Berkeley runs a separate operation from us.
The question was about if the pictures that we showed in the PowerPoint are the most up-to-date pictures of signage. They are, and we can work with you. Part of this program, like I said, with the bin infrastructure is also a signage piece. Any bin that we put anywhere in a building will have a clear label or sign in front of it so that you know which materials are designated for that bin. So there was a follow-up regarding the cartons and clarifying that the city of Berkeley accepts milk cartons in the compost. And so again, as I mentioned earlier, every hauler, municipality, community does do recycling and composting differently and has different rules based on their operations, the type of facilities they have access to, who their buyers are. There's a lot of different factors that impact which materials are and are not accepted. And I see Lynn King, a manager of Cal Zero Waste, has a hand in the back. I'm going to be repeating what you say. So Lynn King, manager of Cal Zero Waste, just mentioned a clarifying point is that wax coated materials are accepted into our compost stream on campus, and that some cartons are wax coated, some are plastic coated. If you want to try a scratch test on the outside of the carton, you can usually tell if it's wax. I will say I think majority of cartons do tend to have some type of plastic lining. So that's an item where if you are using a lot of that, maybe an opportunity to see if there is an alternative number 2 plastic jug to switch towards. But that's a personal decision that you and your department can make. So the question was about lids on our bins and some concern with potential rodent problems. And so all of the bins, with the exception of compost bins in bathrooms, have all the central ones will have lids. So if you see the picture now, they will have lids. So if there's a compost bin in your lunchroom, break room, or in your central hallway area, they will have a lid. Did you have something to add, Michelle?
Yeah, and what was mentioned in the question was an issue for rodents. These bins will be picked up daily, so the food will be removed from the premises on a daily basis if it's generated. So hopefully that'll help with the rodent problem.
So Felix De Leon is in the audience. He's the director of campus operations, and he just responded to the question and said that we will be adding 2 more pest management techs to help with that issue. The question was how many in total will there be, and the total will now be 5 techs. So the question was, will the custodial team be using compostable bags or liners for the compost bins? And the answer is yes. And that is a campus-wide should be happening. And one piece with this bin infrastructure element is we are working closely with custodial to make sure that everything is lined properly and standardized across campus. So the question was about having a lot of events where there's a lot of leftover edible food and asking about edible food waste diversion, which I really appreciate you bringing that up. Thank you. So we do have the basic needs office on campus, and there's a food pantry. So I would definitely recommend reaching out to them to see if there's ways that we can get that food recirculated back onto campus for folks who are members of our campus community who need that food. That's the main resource that comes to mind. There are, I'm sure, outside areas that would do food donations and collections, but I'd first start with campus to see if there's a way to partner there. And they may have some additional recommendations if for some reason they can't take it.
Yeah, another quick recommendation, and I've seen this done before, is to provide to-go boxes for people at the event. If they want to take some home, they have a container, because usually it's like only napkins. I can't really walk out with that. So if there's containers there, people are more likely to take some food home, so you're not left with too much.
Yeah, the basic needs office, I believe, and because we do have a food pantry on campus located in the MLK Student Union, and I believe that's also open to staff and faculty as well. So just know that that's a resource we all have access to.
Yeah, there are off-campus vendors, but I would first stay on campus to see if there's anywhere that you can donate that food to. Yeah.
So the question was about in terms of the zero waste program, where are we in terms of a campus of how many buildings have yet to go through the program? And we have about 40 buildings left remaining. So that's why I was saying the focus this next semester is to really push forward and bring all those 40 buildings through the program. So you're actually part of the first group. We're going to be doing it kind of in groups and clusters based on location, colleges, all of that. So you'll be part of the first wave, and then there'll be 4 more waves afterwards.
To add a clarification, that's 40 state-funded buildings, so it does not include the auxiliaries on campus. So no, none of the housing, athletics, or ASUC buildings. This is only state-funded buildings that we're talking about right now.
What is it as a percent?
Roughly, I want to say 60 to 65. We're at about 110, 120 state-funded buildings on campus, so we're about roughly 65% right now completion.
So the question was about, first you started talking about the art department and specific spaces in the art department that produce different types of materials. When we do these walkthroughs, we will be looking at all spaces and we will determine, I'm guessing something like that we would call it a lab space, given that it's outside of the typical waste stream that we're working with in office spaces. So my guess is that some of those spaces would actually come at a later point once we have a better sense of the volume and type of material coming out of your spaces. And then the other question was about the outdoor carts that our trucks pick up. Those will not be going anywhere. Those will stay. We will be looking at that as part of the program to make sure that you have the right amount. But those are necessary and essential to make sure that the materials actually get collected and leave campus. So the question is about the differences in some of the bins portrayed, and noting that there's some nicer looking bins in the law school that they definitely paid for. So yeah, that would be a separate conversation if that's something your department would want to pay for. They are quite expensive. So right now there is a baseline amount of funding that we do have for this program for state-funded buildings. And so that includes a certain amount of mainly the Slim Jims and the Max R units. So we'll go through and we'll work on that with your buildings. That'll probably come for the first wave. If you find that your department or building really wants to purchase a different one of the approved standard bins that we have, that would be a conversation that would probably happen at a later date.
So Lynn King, Calzary's manager, just mentioned that the stainless steel bins that are on our slides right now are more so used for lobbies and public spaces, and that's a further conversation that can be had to discuss if those can be put in. I just want to do a quick time check. We are running really close, 3 minutes to 11. If anyone has any last questions, all the questions that you all asked will be on our website. Eventually, when we type them all up, we'll post them so everyone has access. If they forget the answers or whatnot, all of that will be online. So the question was for custodial services and how this program impacts their workload and affects the custodians. So this program is built so that the custodians themselves are spending less time collecting trash cans with the move towards, like Izzy mentioned earlier, centralized locations rather than 10 sets or 10 bins every 10 feet. They're just collecting 1 or 2 on that floor, for example. So it's reduction in time used to collect. And it's also in line with the Custodial Services Guide, which is hallways and bathrooms, kitchens, common areas daily, and then the offices and labs are only once a week, so that they're not having to go in twice a week, 3 times, or even daily to collect the office bins. They can spend that time elsewhere. If they just go in once a week, collect what they're supposed to, and then they can spend other times doing other things. Yeah, so it actually, hopefully, the longer term, this program should help them reduce some workload in terms of the trash collection side. The question was specifically for, in this case, 4th Street, if they were looking at the cabinet Max R sets, if there would be an additional cost to the department. I would have to say that needs to be a further conversation to be had in terms of what the cost would be and how much it would be. Because it also depends on how many and placement as well, and the department. So that's a further conversation that I think needs to be had later on. So for the question was, would there be a cost if this department, your department, were on campus through this program? So the answer to that question, through this program, each state-funded building is allocated 1 to 2 sets only. At the moment, the rest of the bins will be the Slim Jim bins, just because those cabinets are made for public areas, high traffic, because they don't move. It's one big unit. So each building, state-funded building, is allocated 1 to 2 sets at the moment. On campus. Off campuses are a little different case that we treat depending on which building and which department. Lynn King, Calzary's manager, just had a few mentions in the audience. One is that any bins, any office bins placed in the hallways now will not be serviced. Our custodians are advised not to service those in the hallways. Please advise your occupants to not do that. It does cause a fire hazard. It's a safety hazard. It also creates a big mess because you're then littering the hallway with cans. So please do not do that. If you do that, there's a high chance that that bin will be removed. Or confiscated if it's in the hallway. The second note was if you do have a personal bin in your office or your space, please do take that home. The custodians will not be servicing that. Once your building goes through this program, the custodians of that space will only be servicing bins that are put out by our team or campus operations with our labels and with our colors. So any bins, please bring home, or if you would like to keep it in your office, this will also be put in an email, but please put a note so we do not remove it from your office when we come through and switch the bins. And two, you will be responsible for servicing that container yourself into a bin that is serviced by our custodial team.
Okay, thank you everyone for being here, and you have our contact information if you have follow-up questions. Thank you.